there's a trend here in the last decade. There's been a rising autocracy around the world, and you found something different this time. Talk about that.
So it is a nascent result. We had the overall score declining for the last 8 years. And this year, the score ticked up a little bit. And so there are a couple of aspects of that to note. The first is the stability that we see in that category of full and flawed democracies. So that's 45% of the index falls into that category. And of those countries, 85% of them either saw their score remain the same or rise. Then within the lower scored countries, the hybrid regimes and the authoritarian regimes, we saw a couple of notable hybrid regimes move up and out of that category into the flawed democracy category. And that's why we're saying it looks like there might be an end to the democracy recession. Now it's too early to say if that is if it's a false dawn or if we're going to see a bit of a turnaround, but it's certainly we can definitively say that the index is no longer falling, and in fact it rose slightly this year.
Mm-hmm. But you had, well, let's just get right to it. You had one huge exception.
We did have a big exception. I think probably most of your viewers can think of who that might be, and that is the United States, where we really saw a decline in civil liberties and a decline in political culture.
And a decline in functioning of government.
And a decline in, I should mention also, yes, a significant decline in functioning of government. And when I've gotten pushback on that, I point out that one of the aspects of functioning of government is having transparency in your government. Most democracies have very highly transparent processes and procedures. And not only do we have a number of agencies that have been gutted or eliminated entirely against the wishes of Congress, but we and have therefore reduced their ability to function. But we also have a big loss of transparency, and that is a problem in a democracy.
And you have a rise in corruption, which gets at functioning and other things.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Very tough. So I want to then take what's going on in the U.S. and circle back to the general rise that you found in the rest of the other countries you looked at. Because when I looked at increased political participation in Europe, for example, some of the reasons you cite for that is a reaction to what's going on in the United States.
Saw that in Europe and Canada.
Right.
Political parties really being able to galvanize the populace, and people observing what happened in the US and saying, oh, I need to increase my political participation. Now, I should say in the US, political participation has not fallen. It's actually pretty steady. And so that is not a criteria where we've seen a significant decline in the United States, but we certainly saw the actions of the U.S. spur other countries to take action.
Yeah, I mean, when I read your report, I felt like it felt like I read it and I thought, well, if the U.S. democracy falls, I think the others do too. I think there's a reaction here towards the end saying, well, no, look, we don't want to go the way they're going. We're worried about it. And we have this governing group that is running around supporting autocratic movements around the globe. J.D. Vance was just in Hungary. Hungary has been on your...
Well, and Hungary they're a flawed democracy. They are holding elections on Sunday, and it will be very interesting to see how those elections go.
Right. Elections are usually the last thing to go, right? And they are the last... what people can do. I mean, people still have that power in places. In Hungary, they probably still have that power. We'll see what happens if the votes get counted. And here we have that power, notwithstanding any efforts to say, well, we'll federalize elections. That is not a power the federal government hasn't been able to get it, even if it wanted to try it. But I was stunned, and I'm going to stay with the U.S. a little bit. I was stunned that you were as clear as you were about the efforts of the administration to undermine democracy. I mean, you just laid them out there. There wasn't any pulling any punches.
We don't pull punches. That's part of our brand.
Yeah.
We call it like we see it, and it's fact-based, it's evidence-based. Now, one thing that is happening in the U.S. Is that we are seeing things happen in the courts, and that part of our civil liberties is working, right? So while there was a decline, we do see the courts working. And we see that there's pushback. That is just not a straight line, however. It is a jagged road, and it will take time for that check and balance to come into place, to put some governance on the executive branch of government.
Yeah. I read that too, and I thought, in fact, what you said was, as long as the courts hold, we'll be okay. So that tells me, A, that there is a concerted attempt to make sure we're not okay, and they have to do their job, which I thought was brave of you to say. The other question it raises is whether the courts, even if they hold, remain relevant. We have a story just this week that the courts ruled that the Defense Department violated their orders about allowing journalists into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
So the executive branch has to still obey court orders for the courts to be relevant.
Well, and I think the body politic has to be aware and push back on that at the appropriate time when we go to the polls.
Yep.